Okay, so before you grab your popcorn and judge me, let me start by saying this. I am not some spoiled, dramatic kid who got kicked out because I could not handle adult life. I am 24 years old. I have had a job since I was 16. I have paid my own car insurance since I was 18. And I even used to loan my parents money when they were short. Yes, loan to my parents. I am that kind of daughter, the reliable one, the one who shows up, helps out, and never complains. My name is Amanda Hayes, but my dad usually just called me Mandy. That was back when he still liked me, before the whole $67,000 disaster that apparently I caused. My dad, Richard Hayes, is 53. My mom, Deborah, is 51. They have been married since high school. The whole small town love story thing that people romanticize until they see how it actually turns out after 30 years of resentment and poor communication. In our house, dad's word was law and mom's word was a polite suggestion. You know that dynamic where one parent controls everything and the other survives by keeping the peace? That was my parents in a nutshell. And then there is my uncle Derrick, dad's little brother, 47 years old, professional freeloader, and somehow always the poor victim in every story he tells. If there was an Olympic event for playing dumb while manipulating everyone around you, Derrick would win gold for Team USA. I grew up watching Derrick get away with everything. He would borrow money and never pay it back, crash on our couch for a few nights that turned into months, and always had some sob story about why none of it was his fault. My dad would rant about him constantly, calling him useless, irresponsible, and immature. But still, every time Derek called, Dad dropped everything to help. It was like he had this permanent blind spot where his brother was concerned. I think it came from guilt. Dad was the successful one, the one who started his own contracting business, bought a house, and built something from nothing. Derek, meanwhile, bounced from job to job, girlfriend to girlfriend, always broke, always with an excuse. Dad pitied him, and Derek knew exactly how to use that. Fast forward to about 6 months ago. I was working full time as an office manager for a logistics company and helping Dad part time with the bookkeeping for his business, Hayes Contracting. It was something I had done since college, keeping track of invoices, payroll, taxes, all that stuff. I had access to the company's financial system through my old login, and I checked in once or twice a week to balance the books. Everything was fine until it suddenly wasn't. One Wednesday afternoon, Dad called me and said he needed me to come by the office. He sounded strange, flat, cold, like he was reading from a script. When I got there, he was sitting at his desk with his laptop open, staring at the screen like it had just confessed to murder. He said, "Care to explain this, Mandy?" and turned the laptop toward me. I saw a spreadsheet full of missing checks, withdrawals, and wire transfers. My name, my credentials were listed next to every single one. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I asked him what I was looking at, and he said, "Don't play dumb. You know exactly what this is. $67,000 gone." I felt like someone had kicked me in the stomach. I told him that wasn't me, that I had never touched that money, that maybe someone used my login. He did not even hesitate before saying, "Your uncle noticed the discrepancies. He said you were the only one with access." And there it was, the dagger. Derek had discovered the theft. Apparently, while I was busy working my actual job, Dad had asked Derek to help out with payroll and invoices. You know, because that is what you do when your brother cannot keep his own lights on, hand him the keys to your company's finances. Derek told him he noticed suspicious transactions under my name and thought I might have been covering it up. Dad, the genius detective that he is, believed it instantly. No talk, no investigation, no, let's sit down and figure this out. He just decided that his reliable, rule following daughter had suddenly turned into a thief. Within a week, he told me to get out. Literally threw my clothes into garbage bags and told me to go stay with the people I'm obviously funding. That line will haunt me forever. Mom cried, "Of course." She stood there wringing her hands while I packed up my car, whispering things like, "Your father just needs time." And maybe when things calm down. But she did not stop him. She never stopped him. I moved in with my best friend, Tessa. Her apartment was tiny, but it had warmth. the kind that comes from people who actually care about you. I worked double shifts to cover my share of rent and cried exactly once, alone in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store when the reality of being disowned over something I did not do finally hit me. After that, I stopped crying. If my dad wanted to burn our relationship over his lying brother, then fine. I would let him choke on the smoke. 3 months later, karma decided to clock in. Turns out Uncle Derrick wasn't just lazy, he was a full blown scam artist. He had been siphoning money from Dad's clients, creating fake invoices and fake business names to reroute payments. One of the suppliers reported a missing payment, and when they investigated, they found it had gone to a fake company called DH Maintenance Services. DH Derrick Hayes. Subtle, right? The police got involved, the business accounts were frozen, and clients started pulling their contracts. Dad's whole company collapsed practically overnight. And the best part? Derrick vanished, packed up his stuff, and disappeared before anyone could even question him. I did not hear from my parents at all. Not a sorry, not an I should have believed you. Nothing, just silence. I told myself I did not care, but the truth is, I did. Then came this morning. It was exactly 7:14 a.m. I was sitting on my couch in pajamas drinking coffee when someone started pounding on my apartment door like they were trying to break it down. I looked through the peephole and there he was, my dad. His face looked older, worn, like someone had sucked the life out of him. His hair was grayer, his clothes wrinkled, and there was this wild, desperate look in his eyes. He started shouting through the door. He said things like, "You ruined my life. And if you hadn't left, maybe Derrick wouldn't have gotten away with it." He accused me of turning people against him, of talking to the police, of spreading lies about our family. He even threatened to call the cops on me for slander. I just stood there, coffee in hand, listening. I did not say a word until he paused, waiting for me to respond. Then I said, through the door, "Maybe if you had trusted your daughter instead of your con artist brother, you would still have a business, Dad." He exploded. Started yelling louder, kicking at the door, saying things I won't repeat. I could hear his voice breaking halfway through the rant. I do not think it was just anger anymore. It was regret. But the kind that comes too late after everything is already ruined. He kept shouting until finally, after about 5 minutes, he stomped off down the hall. As I watched through the peephole, I noticed something strange. He got into a truck, Derrick's old truck, the same one the police are probably still looking for. Now I am sitting here, typing this out, staring at the clock, wondering if I should call the cops. Because as much as I want to be the good daughter, something tells me Dad's about to do something very stupid. So, remember how I said I thought Dad might do something stupid? Yeah, turns out I underestimated him. I thought he would just keep yelling at me through the door, maybe send a few angry texts, and eventually crawl back into whatever cheap motel he was staying at to drown himself in beer and bad decisions. I was wrong. He decided to take things to a whole new level of chaos. 2 days after that morning visit, I got a call from my mom. I didn't recognize the number because she called from her work phone. She works at this small dental clinic in town, answering calls and doing paperwork. Her voice was shaking when she said, "Mandy, your father came here." For a moment, I couldn't even process what that meant. Apparently, Dad had shown up in the middle of her shift. Sweaty, disheveled, eyes bloodshot, the whole tragic movie scene. He started yelling in the reception area about how Derrick took everything and how Mandy needs to come fix this. He was demanding money, asking if Mom had access to their joint account, and shouting about betrayal while patients and coworkers stared like they'd just walked into a soap opera. Mom said the office manager threatened to call security if he didn't leave, and that's when he started pounding on the front desk, screaming that everyone was against him. He finally stormed out after someone mentioned the police. Mom was hysterical when she called me afterward, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. She said he's been losing it ever since the business fell apart. I sat there on the phone, staring at my coffee table, feeling that familiar mix of anger and pity swirl in my chest. She told me they had to sell the house to pay off the debts. Apparently, between the loans and the stolen funds, the whole financial structure of their life crumbled. Dad's been staying at some rundown motel on the edge of town, drinking, spiraling, blaming me for abandoning the family. That phrase hit me like a slap. Abandoning the family. The same family that threw me out like trash without a second thought. I told her, Mom, he kicked me out. I didn't abandon anyone. She said she knows that, but she's stuck in the middle. That's when I told her, as gently as I could, that she's only in the middle because she refuses to pick a side. There was silence on the line after that, the kind of silence that feels like a weight pressing against your ribs. I could tell she didn't want to hear it, but deep down, she knew it was true. After we hung up, I couldn't shake the image of my dad standing in that dental office, ranting like a madman while my mother cried behind the counter. This man used to be so steady, so sure of himself. He was the kind of dad who woke up at 5 in the morning to go to work, who lectured me about responsibility and honor every chance he got. And now he was a stranger, a man unraveling in public, clinging to whatever scraps of control he had left. Over the next few days, I heard bits and pieces from people back home. My aunt messaged me on Facebook to say that Dad had been calling relatives, demanding money, telling everyone that Derrick had ruined his life, but that I had helped him by leaving. Apparently, he's convinced himself that I knew what Derrick was doing, that I left to protect him, that I'm part of some elaborate betrayal plot. It's insane, completely detached from reality. Then came the text. It was late, around 11:30 at night. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted, ready to collapse into bed. My phone buzzed, and when I saw his name, my stomach dropped. I hadn't heard from him since that morning he showed up at my door, and part of me hoped I never would again. The message was a photo. It showed him sitting inside Derrick's old truck, the one the police were still looking for, parked somewhere dark. His face was half lit by the dashboard glow. His eyes were wild, sunken, and unfocused, like a man who hadn't slept in days. The caption under the photo read, "You'll see what happens when family betrays family." For a solid minute, I just stared at the screen, frozen. My brain couldn't decide whether to laugh or panic. It felt like something straight out of a bad thriller, except it was my father, not some stranger. I sat there, heart pounding, realizing that this wasn't just anger anymore, it was obsession. He had officially crossed into dangerous territory. I don't know what he thought he was accomplishing with that message. Maybe he wanted to scare me, or maybe he genuinely believed he was some kind of vigilante out for justice. Either way, it was enough to make my skin crawl. I thought about calling the police, but what was I supposed to say? That my father sent me a creepy text in a stolen truck and might be planning something stupid? They'd take a report, maybe send a patrol car by his motel, but unless he did something, they wouldn't act. And honestly, I didn't want to be the one to push him further over the edge, so I did the only thing I could. I stared at that message for a long moment, took a deep breath, and pressed the block button. The screen went quiet. No notifications, no vibrations, no more chances for him to drag me into his chaos. I blocked his number. Police came to my door this time. Not because I was in trouble, but because Dad had been arrested. I wish I could say I was shocked, but honestly, I think I had been waiting for this moment without realizing it. It felt like the natural next chapter in a story that had been spiraling for months, a story I never wanted to be part of, but got dragged into anyway. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of morning where the world feels too normal for bad news. Sunlight through the blinds, the faint sound of traffic outside, coffee brewing. I was half asleep when I heard the knock. Not the angry, chaotic kind like my father's had been, but firm, official, measured. When I opened the door, there were two officers standing there. Both looked tired, the kind of tired you only get from dealing with family drama that has spilled into criminal territory. The taller one asked if I was Amanda Hayes, and when I said yes, he nodded like he had expected that answer. They explained that my father, Richard Hayes, had been taken into custody earlier that morning. Accessory to fraud and obstruction of justice. It took me a second to process it. They said it so plainly, like they were reading the weather report. But the words hit hard. Accessory to fraud, obstruction of justice. My dad, the man who once stood in front of me and called me a thief, was now the one sitting in a cell for trying to steal money that wasn't his. Apparently, after Derrick skipped town, Dad decided to take matters into his own hands. The police had frozen all business accounts linked to Hayes contracting as part of the investigation. Most people would understand that means hands off. Not my father. He decided he was above the law. He had gone to a local bank branch, tried to transfer funds from the seized account into a separate one under his name, and when the teller told him the funds were restricted, he caused a scene. He yelled about how it was his company and he had a right to access what's his. When that didn't work, he tried again a few days later, this time through an online portal. What he didn't know was that all the account activity was being monitored by the investigators handling Derrick's fraud case. So they flagged the transaction immediately. When the police looked into it, they found that he had also been in contact with one of Derrick's old business associates, trying to get documents and passwords to prove ownership. It turns out that alone was enough to qualify as obstruction. And to make it even worse, he had been using the truck registered to Derrick, the same one I saw outside my apartment, to move around what the police later described as sensitive materials. I didn't ask what that meant, but I can guess it wasn't anything innocent. The officers asked me a few questions about my involvement with the business. I told them the truth. I used to help with bookkeeping, but I hadn't touched anything since my father kicked me out. They wanted to know if I had any records or backups of financial data, so I showed them the old flash drive I still had with company spreadsheets and payroll records. They thanked me and said it could be useful to verify the timeline of transactions. I gave them everything without hesitation. For once, I felt in control of something. They asked if I knew where Derrick might be. I told them the last I heard he was gone. No contact, no trace, no social media, nothing. They said they suspected he was out of state, possibly under a different name. I didn't ask for details. I didn't want to know. The conversation was polite, professional, and quick. But inside, I was laughing. Not out loud, not in a cruel way, but in that quiet, uncontrollable way you laugh, when life's irony is so sharp it cuts through years of pain. It was poetic, really. My father, the man who threw me out and called me a liar, got caught trying to move stolen money from an account that had already been seized. The same man who lectured me about integrity, who used to tell me, stealing is the lowest thing a person can do, had been arrested for trying to steal what was never his to begin with. It felt like the universe had been watching, keeping score, and finally decided to cash in all its chips at once. Mom called later that evening. She had found out through one of Dad's old employees who saw the arrest at the bank. She was heartbroken, but not surprised. She said he had been drinking more, talking nonsense about how everyone had turned against him, even hinting that he could fix things if people would just give him what's his. I think deep down she knew it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. She said she didn't know what to do, that she still loved him but couldn't keep watching him destroy himself. I told her she needed to focus on saving herself this time. When I hung up, I sat there in the quiet of my apartment, thinking about everything that had happened in less than a year. It was like watching a slow motion collapse. My family had gone from a stable, predictable life to a headline in the local news. I thought about the day he kicked me out, the way he looked at me with disgust, like I was something beneath him. And now, he was the one being fingerprinted, questioned, booked. There was something brutally satisfying about that symmetry. I know it sounds cruel to say, but I felt relief. For the first time, the truth wasn't hidden behind his authority or his version of events. It was out there, in police reports, in legal documents, in undeniable facts. The man who once claimed I betrayed him had betrayed himself. And the universe, karma, fate, whatever you want to call it, had made sure he paid in the most fitting way possible. Karma didn't just knock. She broke the door down and set up camp. Derrick got caught in Arizona, trying to cash fake checks under his alias. I found out through a news alert that popped up on my phone at work. It was surreal seeing his mugshot again after all these months. The same greasy hair, the same smirk that used to charm people just long enough for him to get what he wanted. The article said he had been using a fake ID and opening accounts under different business names, the same playbook he used to destroy my father's company. This time, though, he wasn't slick enough to get away. The bank teller recognized his face from a fraud bulletin, and by the time he tried to run, the police were already waiting outside. It felt like the universe had been taking its time, letting him dig the deepest hole possible before finally throwing the dirt back in. Meanwhile, my dad's facing a mountain of legal trouble. The charges keep stacking: fraud, attempted embezzlement, obstruction, and whatever else the state decided to tack on. His lawyer quit after the second hearing because he wouldn't stop arguing that he was the real victim. Last I heard, the public defender assigned to him filed for a competency evaluation. The irony is hard to ignore. The man who built his life on control is now sitting in a cell, stripped of every ounce of it. Mom finally left him. She showed up at my apartment one rainy afternoon with 2 suitcases and a box of family photos. Her eyes were puffy, but she looked lighter somehow, like a storm had finally passed. She said she couldn't take it anymore. The calls from creditors, the humiliation, the lies. She had sold off what little was left, closed their joint account, and walked away. She's staying with me now. It's a small apartment, barely enough space for 2 adults and her endless collection of old decorative pillows, but she says it feels like peace for the first time in years. I believe her. Sometimes I catch her sitting by the window with her coffee, staring out at nothing, smiling in that quiet, broken but free way. I asked her once if he ever said sorry. She shook her head and said, "No, but he cried when they took his truck." I guess that's something. That truck, Derrick's old one, the same one Dad drove like it was some symbol of loyalty, was impounded as evidence. It was the last thing connecting him to the illusion of control he'd been clinging to. And when they took it, I think reality finally hit him. As for me, life has been strangely stable. I got promoted at work, which still feels weird to say out loud. Turns out being accused of grand theft gives you a crash course in resilience and documentation. I'm sharper now, calmer, and less naive about who deserves my trust. My boss said he's never seen anyone so organized with records and email trails. I didn't tell him trauma makes great training material. Every now and then, I get these weird texts from unknown numbers. Things like, "You'll regret this," or "We know what you did." I don't even bother responding. I just screenshot them, archive them, and block the number. Part of me used to wonder if it was Dad trying to lash out or some friend of Derrick's trying to stir up drama. But the truth is, I don't care anymore because I already did regret it years ago when I spent every ounce of my energy trying to earn my father's love by being perfect. Now I'm just done. There's a quiet power in letting go of people who would rather destroy themselves than face the truth. It doesn't feel like revenge, it feels like release. My mom and I still talk about the past sometimes, but it's different now. Less pain, more acceptance. We laugh about things we never could before. I finally see her as her own person, not just my dad's shadow. And if you're wondering what I'll do when he gets out of jail and tries to come crawling back, let's just say I've got a new door. Reinforced steel. No knocking allowed.